Welcome back to Kings of the North. Doug Lesmerises and Bill Landis. And Landis, I like these shows where we hit all 26 of our teams at the same time. And this is one of those, right? A little sprinkle. I think that's the way you cover sports. You go 30,000 feet and you look from above, and then you get down nitty gritty and you dig in. So sometimes we're going to dig in. We did a whole show about is Ohio State now to your bus? But now we're 30,000 feet soaring above everything from Piscataway to the Pacific. 26 teams. Which way do we think they are trending? Up, down, the same. And then there are 7 schools that we disagreed on.
Yeah.
That we'll talk about at the end. But do you like these when we hit everybody?
I like when we hit everybody, and I also like when you and I have some differing opinions on what's happening. So this will be good. I'm excited.
We shared our opinions, so we know what we think of this. And 26 northern schools, I think I might have had 17 trending up, 19 trending up. And I said, I'm a little optimistic. And you seem surprised by my optimism.
I am surprised by your optimism. This show has brought out a new optimistic side of Doug that I'm still growing used to.
What it is that my hate and distaste and anger is concentrated on the South. And so I'm embracing all of our northern brothers and sisters, right?
Yeah.
And we are going to talk this show. In order for this show to succeed, it must include more Southern hate. There's no doubt about that, right?
Yes.
That has got to be a central tenet when we get to the season of why the South isn't as good as you think it is. National college football, every show that's Southern focused. We're just not doing that right now because we're focusing on our schools. Mm-hmm. We're not focusing on why those schools are overrated or they stink or they're nuts. But we'll get there, and then I'll be angry.
Off season Doug is chill Doug. I got it.
Yeah. I'm saving all my pessimism for Georgia.
Yeah.
I'm like, it's lasers at you think they're going undefeated? Here's why they're not. That kind of thing. Why Tennessee is overrated, why Texas is still a fraud, why LSU is a mess. All of that will come. It's just not the offseason stuff.
Yeah.
Trending up, trending down. Because I want to say I don't want to say it's the persona I've adopted, but what I'm interested on this show with this endeavor is helping Northern college football fans enjoy their teams. That is the number one goal of this. So if I'm interested in fans enjoying their teams, I'm not going to lie to them. I don't want to lie, but I'm looking through the lens of enjoying your team. So I am looking for reasons for you to like your team, but if I don't find them, I'm not going to lie to you. So that's why I have a rosy glow.
Yeah. You found a lot. Your list was long. I think I had 12 trending up.
Yeah. And there's a lot of agreement. And again, if you guys want to, when we do shows like this, I would always suggest think in your head right now. Think about the 26 Northern teams, or think about the 11 that you really care about, or the 4, or the whatever, and try to think to yourself, do I think they're trending up? They're trending down? Are they staying the same? Whatever. And see if you agree with us. There was a time when we were discussing this show when I was thinking about, should we say they're trending up 27 degrees and this team is trending up? And then I thought, no.
Thank God. I don't want to have to get out my protractor.
Yeah. Producer Mike just building what percent? You said Michigan State is trending up 17.4%. How do I show that on a graph? And I thought, is that a good show? It's not.
No.
So we just have generic categories. So let's start optimistic Doug. There's a time when I would have started let's talk about the teams that are falling apart.
Yeah.
We're not starting with that. We're starting with the teams that are trending up. And there is a different discussion here. The worse you are, the greater opportunity you have to trend up, because there's nowhere to go but up. And so we're going to start with our trending up teams. We're going to start with the teams that had the worst records last year and end with the teams that had the best records, but still somehow are trending up. And there's a common denominator with several of our trending up teams, Bill, which is a reset. And our number one team that is trending up is 3-9 Indiana. You can see some other teams here: 3-9 Indiana, 4-8 Michigan State, 6-7 Syracuse. Right? All new coaches this year. We're very excited about them. Are there any other new coaches, Mike, on the rest of this? Wisconsin is fairly new with Luke Fickell, right? Neil Brown got a real reset at West Virginia last year, but there are some of this is you hit a version of rock bottom. And so now we like the hire because there is a world, Bill, where there could be schools that have new coaches that we don't like to hire and we don't think you're trending up.
Yeah, for sure. But no, I don't clearly none of these fall into that category. But even like a Rutgers, right? Like Rutgers is not so far removed from like resetting with Greg Schiano. Nebraska has reset with Matt Rule going into year 2, right? Like, I mean, with the exception of honestly, like Ohio State, Oregon, Utah, I think most of these teams are resetting.
Yeah. So the schools that we agreed are trending up: Indiana, Colorado, Michigan State, Nebraska, Syracuse, Iowa State, Rutgers, Wisconsin, Utah, West Virginia, Ohio State, Oregon. Those are our 12 trending up teams. And let's brush on all of them individually, starting with the 3-9 Hoosiers. You love the hire. Why do you think Indiana is trending up with Curt Cignetti?
Because Curt Cignetti wins. He'll tell you about it any chance he gets, right? I just like, one, it's hard, I think, to be worse than they were the last couple of years under Tom Allen. But I still don't know what the ceiling is there, right? Like I'm not sitting here thinking that Indiana is going to be a perennial playoff team, but I think that baseline level of success for Curt Cignetti is that Indiana is probably no longer going to be living in the basement of the Big Ten, even this new Big Ten, right? So like I don't know, I just feel there's a level of competency and program structure and understanding what it takes to be a consistent winner with this coaching staff that I believe in, even if that means merely being a bowl team, like on average, right? That is a much different existence than from what Indiana has been for much of its tenure, much of its existence. Yeah.
I do think it matters how they got this staff. Tom Allen previously took over because things got sideways with Kevin Wilson, and they promoted the defensive coordinator who he hadn't even been that long as a defensive coordinator there. And they certainly had a peak in the COVID year, but it was not at all sustained. And it wasn't a plan. And sometimes when you don't have a plan and stuff just happens, you luck into something. And they did briefly with that Michael Penix season. My God, they beat Penn State, Michigan in the same year and like made the top 10. Like it's a miracle season. It's also a COVID season. It just wasn't as sustained. This is a plan. Like, who'd you hire? Dude who wins. Like a bottom line dude who wins wherever he goes, who's sort of been waiting for this opportunity. And so,
and not only wins, but also like won at places that were not winning previously.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
And so like this, like there could have been a world where, and I don't mean to be, I think maybe in the end, Tom Allen's a defensive coordinator. I think Tom Allen's going to be a good defensive coordinator at Penn State, right?
Yeah, I think so. Very good. Yeah.
Curt Cignetti's a program builder. Curt Cignetti's a dude running the show. So like we like the potential there, and they've done enough in the portal. A lot of guys from his old stop, a lot of JMU guys, but we also like, they're just doing some things. So we want to acknowledge like the plans, right? Because is there a world, Bill, where there could be a school that just fired a head coach, and we look at the hire and we're like, oh yeah, still trending down? Like, is that possible?
Yeah, I mean, I think it happens all the time because a lot of times when firings happen, they happen because like I think the program sort of like already knows who it wants next. But then you don't get that person. It's like, oh, that plan backfired. So yeah, like that can clearly happen. I think it happens a lot. I think with programs, sort of like of Indiana's positioning in the sport, but it didn't happen here. Like it felt like they moved on from Tom Allen with a very clear idea of what they wanted to do, and then they executed that idea and like got a guy who was one of the hotter, I think, coaching names out there this cycle. Even though Curt Cignetti is on the older side, I guess it's not like they got like a young whippersnapper head coach, but they got a guy who's got a proven level of consistency.
There's something that I wanted to bring up while we're talking about Indiana here, and we're not going to go this long on every team, but we had talked about this before, and sometimes we don't know what we're saying. I didn't know this. Listener Ryan informed us about this. The Indiana quarterback coach, Tino Sunseri, was a grad assistant at Alabama when Julian Lewis was like 8 or 9 or 10 years old. and went to a football camp. They have known each other forever. He's kept in contact with Julian Lewis, and that's why Julian Lewis, the 5-star quarterback, is visiting Indiana. And I think we had that conversation previously and did not have that connection at front of mind. But like, another reason Indiana is trending up because they're getting maybe the best quarterback in a class, like coming to hang out in Bloomington.
Yeah, not a bad thing to sprinkle a little Alabama onto Indiana. It's all right.
Yeah. So thanks to Ryan for pointing that out. All right. So Indiana is trending up. Next team that's trending up is, again, I don't know that everybody would agree with this. 4-8 Colorado, we think, is trending up because I think to me, it's like you still have to consider where they were, which was Mel Tucker left them after a year. Carl Durrell just did not work. They were dead. It's like a dormant program. And Dion came in and gave them something. And if you think there are parts of the football that can't be worse, like can the offensive line be worse? No. And it's still better than 1-11.
Right.
I was certainly okay with Colorado trending up. Was this a slam dunk trending up for you?
Yeah, 4 is greater than 1. Yeah, you know what I mean? Like, context matters. We're not trying to necessarily gaslight you into thinking that Colorado is going to be a playoff team this year, but I think they are unquestionably trending up in a positive direction from where they were before Deion Sanders got there. Where it's going to go, no clue. Could crash and burn this year, but for the time being, it seems like they are trending up.
They haven't had a winning season since 2016, other than going 4-2 in the COVID year. So it's like, again, and they were 1-11. They were 1-11, and then they hired Dion. So that's still up. I'm like on edge now about like saying anything positive about it. I really am not. Like, but that is, I think the context matters here. So there's different versions of trending up. This is not a rocket ship to the moon. This is not a 90-degree angle. Here we go, Colorado. But also, it's where you start. So, if like
this protractor was broken, it was smashed into pieces, and now it's merely intact.
I'm bringing my protractor, and it's Louis. Does Louis Vuitton make a graphing calculator? I got a Louis Vuitton graphing calculator. I don't know how to turn it on, but it looks good. All right. Next trending up is Michigan State. And this is very similar to Indiana. Just a mess, more of a mess than Indiana after the Mel Tucker situation. Just an absolute mess of last year. Harlan Barnett did the best job he could trying to piece it back together as an interim head coach. But we also like the Jonathan Smith hire. I knew we'd both be here. Who has a steeper, which is better, trend line? Michigan State or Indiana, would you say?
Ooh. Probably Michigan State. Or you mean who is better situated now is what you're asking me?
No, I guess it's like, if we had done the 31% trending up, right? Wherever. So maybe we would start Michigan State and Indiana at different places. Historically, recruiting base, resources, that kind of thing. But then wherever we start them, we say, okay, they're trending up. But who's trending up like this? Who's trending up like this? Whose line is steeper on the graph?
I actually kind of think Indiana's is steeper.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which they probably start lower. I get now I feel like we should have done a graph. Can we we'll just do it after the fact. Michael just like, okay, draw it in. Drop it in right here. Not worth it. But so explain. Steep.
Well, there's just because there's more like I don't know what you would consider an improvement. I think is probably more easily attainable for Indiana than it is for Michigan State. Does that make sense? Like Michigan State has won the Big Ten in recent memory, has gone to the playoff in recent memory, and I think people want that back, and that's going to be a really difficult road, I think, for Jonathan Smith to try to navigate. Whereas like a steep trend line for Indiana is like. We have an 8 back-to-back 8-win seasons. Like this is awesome, right? I just think that feels like more easily attainable to me. I don't know if I answered that right, but that's
is an 8-4 regular season at Indiana is equivalent to a 10-2 regular season at Michigan State.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
Yeah. I think that's right. Yeah.
What do you think is more likely? What will happen first? Indiana wins 8 regular season games or Michigan State wins 10?
Indiana wins 8.
Okay. I might take Michigan State wins 10, but like this is an interesting. Let's play this game.
Yeah.
We'll do a bunch of just Indiana, Michigan State head-to-head focused episodes. We'll get Kurt Signetti and Jonathan Smith to square off at Big Ten Media Days. All right, trending up Michigan State, Nebraska. We think Nebraska is ready for not just a trend, but a jump. 5-7 a year ago. We certainly are thinking maybe 8 wins, maybe 9 wins. I don't think we think 10 wins is impossible. This was obvious, yes?
Yeah, I think so. And this is a lot of things, but I think mostly it's the Matt Rule track record, but also year one for Matt Rule in Nebraska being like much better than year one has been for him at like Temple and Baylor. And then like he took jumps there, assuming he takes the jump here, like this is a much better starting point in year 2 than he has had previously. So yeah, it's odd to say for a team that has been, in a pool of mediocrity for so long, and probably worse than that. Anything less than like 9 wins feels like it's been a disappointment for Nebraska this year.
It's a really interesting spot because they're right. It's all optimism and hope right now for Nebraska because you're looking at 5-7, which 5-7 got Scott Frost fired. But you're looking, and like they had a bunch of close losses. Close losses got Scott Frost fired. But that same record and those same close losses are providing optimism for Matt Rule. So this is right. This is the epitome of a honeymoon period.
Yes.
Right. Where it's like, even you got home from the honeymoon and it's like, it's a 5-7 honeymoon. Maybe it rained a little bit.
Yeah.
Maybe you got a little tired. Right. Like it's a 5-7 honeymoon, but it's early in the marriage. It's all good. And nobody is yet asking Matt Rule why he hasn't mowed the lawn yet.
Right.
But like we're right. So enjoy this, Nebraska, because what an offseason this is. But you are potentially heading towards the world where 7-5 or maybe even 8-4 will make you mad.
Yeah. Well, it's also it's the Colorado game. It's like whatever happens in a Colorado game is going to determine how the marriage works out, I guess.
You think Matt Rule is just watching that Dan Lanning speech over and over and over again?
Yeah.
What was he say about? Oh, we don't care about what they say in the headlines or to the cameras. Oh, there's cameras here. We don't care about. Is this close up? We don't care about the cameras. I think Nebraska's going to be good. We agree on this. Talk about it a lot. Syracuse 6-7, trending up. Good hire, good transfers, absolute opportunity. And it's one of those things, again, like the whole thing with Dino Babers was they would start off hot and then fall apart. They weren't 1-11 though. Like I do think there's sometimes you can feel like, oh man, Syracuse, they were 2, and no, they weren't. They've been like a 500 team. It's just every year, at least the last 2 years, they started off well. They played an easy non-conference schedule. They gave you hope, and then they fell apart. So this actually like isn't as low as maybe I think the perception is. And I don't want to set like Syracuse fans up for disappointment. I mean, I think there's actually, they could have a worse record. Like right now, I think, you have to pull me back from the edge of why Syracuse can win the ACC, but it's year 1 for a coach, right? I don't know. It's not like anyone's saying like, man, if Fran Brown doesn't go 8-4, we're going to storm the Carrier Dome. But I'm guilty as this as anybody. Like, I don't want to set up Syracuse for failure by saying, hey, you've been a 500 team and that wasn't good enough and look out 9 wins. So this trend line might be less steep than at least my talk on this show would indicate.
I considered us staying the same for those reasons. I ultimately ended up on trending up because you just can't help but feed off the Fran Brown juice a little bit. But
yeah,
I think it is an important reminder that it's this program is not necessarily like a bottom feeder. They were just like kind of average, maybe slightly below average in some respects, but not winning one game, not where Colorado was. So I'm a little conflicted on it. I guess I'll lean into your Fran Brown enthusiasm and say a trending up, but I did strongly consider staying the same.
It's so weird. In the last 6 years of Syracuse football, they have a 10-win season, They have a 10-loss season,
Mhm.
and otherwise they're basically 500, 5-7, 5-7, 7-6, 6-7. So like a peak, a valley, and then a bunch of plateaus.
Mhm.
So the idea, like to go 8-4, would be like, well, they don't even know what that is. That's just like that's a good solid football season, as opposed
Yeah.
to like getting tossed all around and then being average. So I appreciate your pragmatism, but thank you for voting on the trend up so I could
Sure.
not dampen my enthusiasm
Yeah.
with your logic. Thanks a lot, Bill. Iowa State 7-6, trending up because we're all about the Cyclones. Was this obvious for you?
Yeah, I think so. Like, again, I did consider staying the same because like that's just sort of the Matt Campbell way, right?
Yeah.
It's but a lot of it honestly was like 3 more years of Rocco Becht. Like I think they're gonna keep going up a little bit. Yeah.
Fall in love more. Okay. No, I agree. The Big 12, I think the Big 12 this year is going to be kind of like the Pac 12, like what I thought the Pac 12 was going to be last year, but maybe like
Mhm.
80% of the level. But I just thought like the Pac 12 would be in danger going into last season of not getting a playoff team because they all would beat each other up. And then Washington survived, like doing Washington incredible credit. But it's like, well, Oregon was good and Utah was good and Arizona was a problem and USC still had Caleb Williams. And like there's a bunch of super competitive teams in there. Oregon State was excellent, right? Like this is a really good conference.
Yeah.
And I don't think the top of the Big 12 is going to be as high as the top of the Pac 12 was, but I think there's a chance for Iowa State to be really good and go 7-5 and have 3-point losses because I don't have their schedule in front of me, but because, Utah and Arizona and Kansas State and West Virginia and a bunch of Big 12 teams just like are a pain in the neck to deal with. And there's, I think, reasonable optimism around a decent number of Pac-12 teams and Big 12 teams, and they can't all be good.
Yeah, I don't. Would you be totally shocked if no one in the Big 12 wins 10 games?
I would bet on a team emerging.
Yeah.
From the Iowa State, Arizona, Utah, West Virginia, Kansas State Pac. But I think your thing is possible, right?
Yeah.
Like I think it's maybe like 70% somebody breaks through the way Washington broke through last year in the Pac-12, but there's like a 30% chance or a 40% chance that they just beat the crap out of each other because they're good. And that's just the hard thing. College football fans are smart, but sometimes when the not smart people who just talk about college football for 5 minutes as part of their big show, and then they talk about Shohei Ohtani gambling on baseball games, like when they talk about it, then they just think like a conference stinks because they have a lot of good teams and no single great team. And so sometimes conferences are bad, and it's like, ooh. Like, hey, remember when Clemson used to win the ACC and everybody else sucked? Like, I don't think that was the ACC beating each other up. When Ohio State was destroying the Big Ten, like in the 2000s, it's like, I don't think that was like, you know what? I really think the Big Ten is no. It's like there was nobody who could rise up. I think if the Big 12 doesn't have a team break through, it's because it's too many good teams, no great team, right?
Yes, I think that's right. And I will make a prediction right now. A major talking point of November will be Big 12 tiebreakers.
Oh, we should probably do some research on that. We'll get on that. Big 12 tiebreakers. And I am looking forward to, we do this show. It's obviously a heavy Big Ten show. We have a sprinkling of the ACC, but what in the end we are going to do is going to pit the north of the Big 12 against the south of the Big 12. So within that conference, we're going to be like, oh, you think you're cool, Arizona? You do? And we're going to
make our own divisional standings.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah. Make our own standings. Yeah. So because that's the conference that like sort of within one conference best exemplifies our north-south divide at this time. So it's the SEC can cram it and the bottom half of the Big 12 can cram it. Rutgers 7-6. Come on. Me taking Rutgers as a top 10 Big 4 team, did that help you get over the top of Rutgers trending up?
Yeah, kind of. I like this is a program that I think has like drastically raised its floor in a very short period of time. Ceiling whatever. Like I don't know. Probably 7-6, right? But maybe they're there and it's impossible for them to trend further up. But I think there's still a little bit of upward mobility in a college football world now, where the schedules can treat you a little nicer than the schedule has treated Rutgers in the past, right? So that's why I said trending up.
Yeah, schedule's going to help. We think the defense could be almost great, and they have a absolutely workhorse running back, which is again, there's if you want to play the Wisconsin, Iowa, Michigan, Utah game, and it's like there's a path there. There's a way to win that way. So we think Rutgers will win that way. And again, 7-6 a year ago. Can Rutgers go 8-4 in the regular season? With the schedule, it's on the table.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. Trending up, I think, is absolutely the right call. So like record wise, and Schiano's doing his thing.
Yeah.
Like I think it's season specific, but also program. Like this is what Greg Schiano does. Wisconsin 7-6 a year ago. Definite trending up in your mind?
Yeah. Yes. I just like kind of believe in Luke Fickell, right? I don't know that I have like a bunch of tangible evidence to support my belief other than just simply believing, like liking him and believing in that he will get this figured out and moving in the right direction.
We had Zach Heilprin on, who covers Wisconsin, a couple shows ago to talk about Wisconsin spring ball. And like we discussed this, like it's a media thing. And I'm just a media. I can't help it. I'm just a big old media. You think something's going to happen in year one. It doesn't happen in year one. And then you're like, oh, why would anyone think it was going to happen in year one? It's definitely going to happen in year two.
Yeah.
So that's where I am. And mine is like more specifically Phil Longo and folding the air raid offense, or this version of it, into the Wisconsin program. I thought, I think I might have picked Wisconsin to win the West last year. It was like, well, no, that it actually didn't. And now Phil Longo is saying all the things of like, oh, it was never going to work in year one, but in year two. And so you can do that to yourself and get to year 5 and be like, oh, I thought it was going to happen in year 4, but it's really going to happen in year 5. So you have to be on alert for unwarranted optimism, but also just like football wise, there is a part of that makes sense. When you're having a somewhat seismic change in scheme, it might not happen in year 1, right? And I should have remembered that last year.
Yeah, but I also think the one thing that does give me pause is like, was the Phil Longo thing the right choice to begin with, right? But we'll see. I think the idea of like we can't be what Wisconsin's always been on offense, we need the change, is correct. I don't know if point A to point B of Phil Longo was correct.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Yeah. We'll run this clip in a year when they have a new offensive coordinator. We'll be like, oh, we knew it was never going to work. We knew that.
Yeah.
I still think it's going to work. Cut that part out in the future if it doesn't. Utah 8-5. They have been so good. Is this trend related to a year ago, their quarterback didn't play at all, and their number one offensive weapon, tight end Brant Keithy, didn't play, and now both of them should play? Why is Utah trending up? Because they've been awesome.
Yeah.
So can they really are they trending up from what they've been? Or are they trending up from an injury-plagued 8-5 2023 season?
Yeah, I think they're trending up from that season. It is about Cam Rising and Brant Keithy like coming back, like Utah like kind of being whole again, I guess, going into this. But it's also, and it's not, the Big 12 as you just laid out, like is not easy, but I like, and despite the fact that Utah like has won the Pac-12, I like Utah's positioning in the Big 12, I think, a little more than I did in the Pac-12 too. So that's more of a long-term thing than it is. That's not this specific to this year, but like Utah, for as good as it was in the Pac-12, has not gone to the playoff yet, and I think we'll go to the playoff somewhat regularly now with an expanded playoff and it being in the Big 12.
And then, again, this is sort of like the breakup of the Pac-12. To divide that into the teams that wound up in a better spot, the teams that wind up in a different but somewhat the same spot, and the teams that are in a worse spot. Utah is on the list of teams that actually, if you really, because it's not like they were a Pac-12 member forever, they're better. They're not only in a better program, they might be in a better spot. So I felt very comfortable with this as well. I think this is a very reasonable trending up from both of us. This is a tough one, brother, because I think we would have had this team trending down a year ago. They had an awesome year that a lot of people didn't expect, and now we think they can still do even better. And it's 9-4 West Virginia. And if I'm going to put them in the playoff, that means they're trending up from 9-win season.
Yeah, and I have to do the same. But again, like you and I are, I think, outliers there. Like the win total for West Virginia is not reflective of a team that people are expecting to contend for the Big 12 and make the playoff, right? I think people are expecting a little bit of a regression from this West Virginia team. So maybe it would be more fair to put them in the stay the same category to make Neil Brown kind of show that he can do it again. And last year wasn't just a kind of a 1 year spike kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think it was a 1 year spike. I think they're going to win the Big 12, so they're trending up.
And they have some defensive contributors that are going to help them. They have a great 1-2 backfield punch. We love the quarterback, and I think there's a lot of substance there. And I do think it's one of these things. You talk about it enough. There was like another national host the other day that was like, I can't get away from Iowa State. And I was like, hey. Iowa State's our team. And then I was like, oh, other shows talk about these 26 teams too. I didn't remember that. But so I think there might be Iowa State enthusiasm that is out there.
Mm-hmm.
I think the West Virginia enthusiasm might be here.
It's
right
definitely
here.
I think it's here.
Here.
It's going to be like we're gonna have to make a decision. I feel like at some point between like West Virginia, Iowa State, and Utah. Like who? Because they can't all three win the Big 12, right?
We'll have to talk about that. What does a 3-way tie at 10-2 work out? How does that happen? Our West Virginia enthusiasm is not waning at the moment, at least, and so we like Garrett Green. We think he's good. All right. These last two are high bar, but I think reasonable with where we are. And first is Ohio State. 11-2 a year ago. But if you think they have a legitimate chance to win the national championship, you have to say trending up, right?
Yeah. Like the chance of beating Michigan, like getting that back, chance of winning the Big 12 for the first time since 2020. And first national championship since 2014. Yeah. And part of it too, for me was again, there's like team specific and program specific, like they kind of got the NIL stuff figured out too. Right. So like if you thought they were losing some ground there, it seems like they got that back. So you're right. It's an incredibly high bar to be trending up from what Ohio State has been, but I do think they are trending up.
You could, if you don't believe it, if you question Ryan Day, you could, like, they're always there. They've been there they're there every year. They're right there every year, and they haven't gotten it done. They've lost 3 straight to Michigan. They haven't won a national title in a decade. Why would you say they're trending up? They're the same. They are what they always are, which is constantly in the mix and not usually over the top. And so what would shake you from that? Well, what would shake you from that is they are bringing back 9 starters on defense, borderline 10, and the guy they're bringing in who wasn't a starter, it was the best freshman football player in the country last year in Caleb Downs. And so you do that. It is an unusual situation. It is an unusual situation to have this much back. And I don't love subscribing to the sports theory of I'm not going to believe it until I see it. And then once you see it, you're like, okay, well, now I think they can do it. Because there are times, there's all over the place where a guy does it or a team does it for the first time. Yeah. And so there's part of, it's like you can be in the NBA playoffs and be like, I don't believe in Anthony Edwards because he's never done it in this situation before. And Kyrie Irving has. And it's like, well, remember when Kyrie Irving did it for the first time and he had never done it before and then he did it? Sometimes you do it for the first time. So Ryan Day might get over the top for the first time. This recruiting class with Jack Sawyer, JT Tuimoloau, and Trevion Henderson and Donovan Jackson and Denzel Burke might get over the top for the first time because there's all kinds of first times in sports. So every now and then, don't you hear that sometimes? It's like, oh, I'm not going to say it until I see it. It's like, well, then you're going to miss it.
Yeah.
If that's your analysis, you're going to miss a ton.
That was the rebuttal about Texas going into last year, right? Like if you were someone's like, I think Texas is going to win the Big 12 and go to the college football playoff. It's like, well, Sark's never done that. It's like, okay.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah. So yeah, back in the 50s, people were like, "Oh, Woody Hayes has never done it." It's like, well, now we get it. Okay, so now you think they're good? Like before, you thought they stunk. So anyway, I think. Do you think most people would agree Ohio State's trending up, or do you think there'd be a fair amount of people? I don't think you could say trending down, but I think staying the same would be a reasonable designation as well.
I think you might get more people saying stay the same. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Oregon, 12-2, the 2 losses to Washington last year. Lose their quarterback, their top receiver, and their top running back, but have ready replacements. Great offensive tackles, playmakers on defense. I think this is season specific, but more program specific if you believe in Dan Lanning, which I think a lot of people do. So it wasn't a hard one for me to say they can trend up from 12-2, where they lost to their rival twice, and it felt like they had the ability to be a playoff team, and they weren't. Mm-hmm. And you think they'll be a playoff team this year?
Yeah, I think there's a stay the same argument here, similar to the Ohio State argument, the discussion we just had. But I think like programs on upward trajectories, any list of that like has to include Oregon, and it has to include Oregon near the top. And like maybe this specific team is more or less similar to what last year's team was. Like I don't know. I think that'd be fair, right? We had the conversation we did the Big Four is like, is Oregon's offense actually going to be better? And I think we agreed that maybe not, right? Like we would take their receivers and quarterback and running back from last year. So like, if you want to take that information and say like, no, they're the same. Like I don't. It's not a trending down, but maybe it's they're not quite ready to like really hit the ignition or hit the gas yet on going to the top of the sport because they're still trying to figure out their roster.
Yeah. Yeah. But we were comfortable with this. So that's it. Those are our trending up teams. So let's now move to our agreeing on trending down teams. And again, we are optimistic fellas. We had 12 teams that we agreed were trending up. We only have 5 that we agree are trending down. And 2 of them are the teams that played for the national title last year, and both lost their head coaches. So it's just such a weird thing. I don't think it's fair or fun to necessarily come on here and constantly talk about how Michigan and Washington aren't as good as they were, but they're not as good as they were. We'll discuss that. And then we have 3 teams that I think are actually more like the teams that we might be the most concerned about in the North right now. And that's 5-7 BYU, 5-7 Illinois, and 3-9 Cincinnati. So those are the 5 trending down teams that we will talk about. And I just want to restate something as we start talking about Michigan that I've said a million times. And there's just enough sports podcasts and shows that I listen to that I don't think take it into account. There's almost always a cost. There's for very few programs is there not a cost to winning. Maybe the Yankees, right? Maybe Alabama. Very few. You usually have to go all in. You usually have a peak to your greatness, no matter how great you are. And then you come down from that. And I think that happens a lot. I think about it all the time with contracts that professional athletes sign. That it's like, you're going to sign this guy to an 8-year deal because that's the market. And years 5, 6, 7, and 8 are going to stink. And he's going to be overpaid. But to get the 3 or 4 years at the front end, you have to agree to the 4 years at the back end. And then sometimes I think in the back end of the contracts, you'll just listen to people talk on shows and all they talk about is how overpaid and horrible and what a dumb contract this is now, without acknowledging the couple good years you got at the front, which is why you did it. And so you have to, everything we say about Michigan and Washington this year, if we talk about how they're falling short or they're not competing at the highest level, I think we have to just, if we don't include it, we're including it in our hearts and our heads. It was worth it.
Yeah.
They maximized it. They did everything they could last year. And so to talk about seasons and players and situations only in silos of the moment, I think is disingenuous and unfair because there's almost always a cost. And you can't forget about the winning the moment it's over. Right? Nick Saban raising the national championship trophy with a frown on his face because he's thinking about how they're behind in recruiting because they spent the last week preparing for a national championship game. It's about being on the road. It's a hard way to live. Maybe that's what makes Nick Saban great. Fans shouldn't live that way. So Washington and Michigan fans, you did it. Congrats. Awesome year. You're trending down. Let's start with Michigan. How hard is this trend down line on the Wolverines, do you think?
It's for me, it's like for the team specific to this year, like it's somewhat significant. I guess I don't know, it's like 15-0 is 15-0, man. Like to go down from that is probably pretty steep. But I think you and I both believe that Michigan can still be a playoff team, right? So it's not like it's not straight down. You know what I mean? Like it's I still think they're fine. It's just like there's kind of only one way to go once you do this, unless you think they're going to go 15-0 again, which we don't think they're going to do. So it's not incredibly steep, right? And the program conversation is like almost on hold for me. It's like you want to give Sharon Moore a shot, right, to see if he can. Because if they make the playoff this year and then are like sort of just like kind of like back in the conversation again, like going in the Sharon Moore second year, it's like all right, like Michigan has sustained its program. What's the word I'm
Momentum.
looking for? Momentum. Thank you. I was going to say mobility. Yeah, program momentum. But for this specific team, it's probably not going to be quite as good as it was last year. But like not going into the gutter, certainly not.
And I certainly have moved from I kind of didn't think Michigan would be a playoff team this year to I think they could be a playoff team. I'm not 1,000% sure. We're going to do playoff picks here in a little bit, in the next couple of weeks. I'm not 100% sure I'll have Michigan in the playoff, but I will consider them more than I did before spring football. And you did have Michigan in your playoff when we did it in February or whatever. So like, you think they'll still be good.
Mm-hmm.
So their schedule's also significantly tougher.
It's really hard. So, it's really hard.
I mean, it's really hard. Okay, Washington 14-1, a steeper trend line down than
so.
Michigan. Yeah,
I think so. Do you? Yeah.
Yeah, this is tough because it's the triple whammy of you did lose 11 guys to the NFL draft. That's the one whammy. You watch the whammy show, right?
Oh yeah.
Pressure luck, love the whammies.
Yeah.
So that's one whammy. One whammy is bad enough. Second whammy is you lose your head coach. But then the third whammy is then you lose a bunch of guys in the transfer portal that you wouldn't have lost otherwise, some of whom followed your head coach, including your borderline All-American center and your future quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
And the guy who would have been your best returning skill guy. So like it's devastating. Like who has ever had that happen? Like that many NFL guys, that many transfer players, and your staff. They lost everything. They lost more than Michigan. Because like some of the assistant coaches followed Jim Harbaugh to the NFL and the strength coach followed him to the NFL, but none of the players, Will Johnson didn't follow Jim Harbaugh to the NFL, right? Parker Brailsford followed Kalen DeBoer to Alabama. So like, it's the worst of all possible situations for Washington. It could be maybe the steepest down line in the North, but it's also coming from the second highest point in the sport. So it might look like a cliff dive, but they're still going to land in a pool, beautiful blue waters, a pool, purple waters, Puget Sound. They'll land and they dive off a cliff. They land in Puget Sound. Is that the right sound?
Puget Sound is a sound in Seattle, but it is not the body of water that is near their stadium.
I got to get up to date on my bodies of water.
At least I don't think so. I don't think it is.
Cliff dive, we'll cut out the Puget Sound, into a sound, the correct sound, cliff dive, but the pool will still be higher than a lot of teams. It'll just look like it's straight down, but it's not going to land at 2-10, but it might land at 7-5, which is quite a come down from 14-1.
Yeah. And the other part of it for me too is like to take a even broader view, right? Like the peak that Washington experienced last year did kind of come out of nowhere, right? It wasn't like Michigan's peak was a 3-year build to that peak in a way that makes you think that it is built for sustainability beyond it, even after Jim Harbaugh has left. And Washington is not quite that, right? They were never even like I think in the top 10 the year before they went to the national championship. So it's a little bit different dynamic.
Okay. BYU. This is where we just talk a little bit about more like, are we worried about the program? Mm-hmm. Kalani Sitake at BYU. First year is 2016 as the head coach, 9-4. 2017, 4-9. 2018, 7-6. 2019, 7-6. 11-1 in the COVID year in 2020. 10-3 in 2021. 8-5 in 2022. That is awesome. That's 29 wins in 3 years. That is incredible. You're talking about a run that includes Zach Wilson, the number 2 pick in the draft. You're talking about a run that includes Puka Nacua, like the sensation, NFL rookie sensation of the world last year. Talking about a run with Jaron Hall, who started some games. Like, running some dudes. Who's the tackle? Who's your guy? Who just got drafted in the second round, right? Andy Reid drafted him.
Kingsley Suamaitea.
Like incredible success and some dudes at BYU. I love Kalani Sitake. 5-7 last year, and I think they might be headed in the wrong direction. What do you think?
Yeah, I also like Kalani Sitake, and it makes me sad that I think maybe BYU is heading in the wrong direction. It's just you worry, did they bite off more than they could chew by going to the Big 12? I think is that's the fear.
A direct correlation, right? Yeah. Like that they were living in this world, and now they've joined the Big 12, which is kind of like, I think what they had the success that allowed them the chance and the invitation to join the Big 12. And then I think of all the teams, right? UCF, Houston, Cincinnati, BYU, the 4 new teams. Of all the teams, they might be the most, oh no, what have we done to ourselves?
Yes, I think that's right.
So it could go poorly.
Yeah.
Moderately long term in the Big 12. That they might have bitten off more than they can chew.
Yeah. We'll see. I'm worried about it, but I'm optimistic that we'll be wrong.
Other thing is, everyone loves the Kevin Young hire in basketball. Might be headed for an absolute, like they've been like a hoops renaissance at BYU, right? Yeah. So like maybe it's just a basketball school. Legit concern here for BYU. Then the team that might be our number one concern team, it's Illinois. I love the Brett Bielema hire when he came back to the Big Ten. I was so happy. If we had this show then, I would have had a welcome back to the Big Ten Brett Bielema parade. Play at Iowa, coach at Wisconsin, go to Arkansas. That's not where you belong. Come back to Illinois. He makes the Big Ten better. I'm worried. Somebody has to be at the bottom of this conference, and we have so many teams in the Big Ten that are trending up or staying the same. We're actually out of balance, especially me. It's like, hey, how's the Big Ten doing? It's like, everybody's great. It's like, is everybody great? Are you sure? In an 18-team league, like everybody's great? It's like, okay, not everybody. Like 15 teams are great. And then this is one of the 3 that's not. I think maybe in the league are the 2 teams that you would be most worried about in the Big Ten based on who they've been, what they want to be, and what they actually are right now. The new Big Ten most concerned Illinois and UCLA?
Yeah, I think that's right.
What are you thinking about the fighting Bielemas here?
I really like the Brett Bielema hire when it happened too, and it started out great, right? And it just it's plateaued is probably even too strong, right? It just feel like they kind of didn't sustain what they got in those immediate initial returns. And the thing that I think I like least about this, it seems like a lot of its counterparts in the Big Ten are like taking some bigger swings, right? Like Nebraska with Matt Rule and Wisconsin with Luke Fickell, and I would even throw like Indiana and Kurt Cignetti in that conversation as well.
I think you could throw in Purdue taking Illinois defensive coordinator Ryan Walters, which seemed to like deal a blow to Illinois.
And it feels like Illinois is not, but I also think like if Illinois had whatever, like pick another coach right now and then hired Brett Bielema, wouldn't we say like that's a similar swing, or would we not? Would it not quite feel the same?
No, we'd be like,
yeah,
the heck with Kurt Cignetti. Illinois got Brett Bielema,
right? So like, I don't want to write off Brett Bielema completely. It just feels like maybe he hasn't found the right recipe there to build this thing just yet. And I'm a little worried that he might run out of time to do so, and then Illinois is going to get lost in the wilderness.
And it's hard. Like they've had some great players there, like Devin Witherspoon's top 5 pick. That's a great player. Jerzon Newton is maybe as impactful as any defensive player in college football last year. I thought like Isaiah Williams is like a real number 1 receiver there. Like they've had some real guys. Their number 1 running back just transferred to Purdue. Like they've had some real guys go through Illinois, and it didn't really get them a whole lot. And now I don't know who the next versions of those guys are. And it's like, okay, well, like they weren't winning 8 or 9 games a year when they had some ballers, and now what? So this is my number 1 program that I am the most concerned about in the North.
Yeah, I just like 5 wins, 8 wins, 5 wins, and like what are the? Oh, you must be happy with 5 wins this year, right?
Yeah.
That's not really where you want to be.
Yeah.
So I'm
And
pretty
you just wonder
worried.
what's a reset look like? Again, they haven't bottomed
Yeah,
out as much as, 8 wins a couple years ago. I don't want to be dismissive of that because that's like a real thing. But then the other thing that factors into this is there's so much change right now. We're talking about the teams that are moving into new conferences. The disappearance of the Big Ten West is a reality for every former Big Ten West member. That you
yeah,
have to be concerned that whatever you were before, you're not going to be that anymore. So Illinois never won a Big Ten West. Illinois never got to Indianapolis. And now what? Like they didn't
yeah,
capitalize then. And now you're going to find your way where you're at best, the 13th best program in an 18-team league. Like, and that's your new reality. It's a tough spot, man.
this is like when we talk with Adam Rittenberg about some of the changes, and I like mentioned a thing about some northern programs developing the SEC mindset of like pulling that trigger early and firing coaches. Like this is kind of what I was thinking about when I said that, right? Because there was a time where you probably get a pretty long leash at a place like Illinois, right? Like a couple of seasons of 4 wins, 5 wins, like, oh, we'll keep building and see how it goes. Like I don't know if that appetite is going to be particularly strong to do that if Illinois has a 4-win season or a 3-win season coming off of a 5-win season in a world where like, the money is the biggest it's ever been and the conference is adding a bunch of real programs. Like you don't want to fall behind that quickly.
Yeah. Right. You're creating a scenario where, let's say Northwestern blows the doors off Illinois in the season finale at Wrigley
Mm-hmm.
Field in that rivalry game, and Illinois finishes 2-10, and Illinois fires Brett Bielema and hires Zach Lujan, the 29-year-old offensive coordinator at Northwestern, because he runs a cool offense. And they're like, well, we'd rather have that than this. We'd rather have that than this guy who like won 3 Big Ten titles. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that, you wind up in that world of like, we can't have patience. What's a shiny new thing that we can take a flyer on?
Yeah.
Clip that in case that comes true. Last one. Cincinnati 3-9 a year ago. The greatest success story of the 4-team playoff era, that a group of 5 team, if you would have said when it started, is a group of 5 team ever going to get in? I think most people would have said no. They did it. They did it. And then they sent Sauce Gardner off to be the number 4 pick in the draft. And their quarterback went and became an NFL starting quarterback, not long-term. And their number 1 receiver, Alec Pierce from that team, went off and went to be an NFL. Like, just like a real team. Like almost like the closest thing. I think the best comparison for Washington in the playoff era is that Cincinnati playoff team of like, you really built to something with legit talent, but it was veteran. And in the moment, you seize the moment of your one opportunity. Now, also, like, by the way, Cincinnati was pretty close the year before and played Georgia in a New Year's Six game and like competed. Like this was an unbelievable Cincinnati run. And I just don't know what the future holds here. And by the way, they also are jumping into the Big 12. And if BYU is first on the list of, oh my goodness, what have we done? I think Cincinnati could be second on that list among the 4 new Big 12 schools.
Yeah, I'm not feeling great about where things are going. I thought the Scott Satterfield hire I thought was strange, right? Like you got a guy who did all of his winning at a place where like winning was just like part of the deal at App State, wasn't particularly good at Louisville, arguably took a lesser job probably before he was going to get fired, right? To go to Cincinnati, and then he's 3-9 in his first year, and I just like that's not. I thought Cincinnati would have been able to do better on the heels of Luke Fickell than that, and they weren't able to. And maybe part of that is like, well, I don't want to go there after the guy who took Cincinnati to the playoff. So now maybe after another bad season with Scott Satterfield, they can have a better opportunity at getting a more attractive coach because more time has passed from the Luke Fickell comparisons. It's almost like you don't want to be it's not the same thing as succeeding Nick Saban. I understand that, but it's a similar thought process. I think would you rather be Kalen DeBoer or the guy who takes over for Kalen DeBoer? Right. So I think Cincinnati might stand an opportunity of finding itself a better coach to move this thing forward in a year or two. But at the moment, I don't see this situation getting much better.
I feel like Notre Dame took their coach. because it was weird
Yeah.
that Brian Kelly left and Marcus Freeman had just gone to Notre Dame from Cincinnati for 1 year, right? Was defensive coordinator for 1 year. And so if all this had unfolded in this similar way, but Brian Kelly had never left Notre Dame and Marcus Freeman was just like whatever, the third year defensive coordinator at Notre Dame, and then Luke Fickell left and Marcus Freeman had been the defensive coordinator when they made the playoff. And they were like, do you want to come be a head coach for the first time back at Cincinnati? And I think Marcus Freeman would have been like, yeah, I'll believe DC at Notre Dame to be the head coach at Cincinnati. And instead he's the head coach at Notre Dame. And so then Cincinnati there wasn't somebody else sort of on the Fickell tree to take over. I guess they could have given it to Mike Tressel. They didn't. They would have had other options, but Marcus Freeman was like the obvious next coach. It's like if you said to yourself when they were, Luke Fickell's going to get a huge job off Cincinnati making the playoff. Who do you think the next Cincinnati head coach is? You'd be like, it's Marcus Freeman.
Marcus Freeman, no doubt.
It's like, no. He got the fifth best job in college football. He's not the Cincinnati head coach. And so then you're not scrambling because it's a solid job, but you weren't able to retain what you would have wanted to retain from the Fickell era.
Yeah. And I also don't
Thanks, Brian Kelly.
Who the guy for the job is not obvious to me either. It's not Scott Satterfield, but I don't know who it is.
No, I don't know who it is either.
It's like Brian Hartline, but I don't think you take that job.
Right. Now you get into that realm of even though it's a Big 12 job. My gosh, it's a Big 12 job for a team that made the playoff. And it's like, I don't know. Would a coordinator leave for that? It might be Hartline. Actually, Hartline's not a terrible name. But it's like you would, if you're not gonna, you got a veteran head coach who'd been successful. If you're not gonna go that, the next coach is young guy on the way up, some version of that.
Luke.
And so so who is that? All right. Those are our trending down teams. When we come back, we're going to talk about our stay the same teams, and then we're going to fight. We'll do that next on Kings of the North. Trending up, trending down, and staying the same on Kings of the North. Doug Lesmerises and Bill Landis. Two staying the same teams, Bill. We have 8-5 Northwestern, which I think is an interesting discussion, and then 10-3 Penn State. The only two teams that we agreed on staying the same. 8-5 Northwestern. A borderline miracle season a year ago with David Braun to go 7-5 in the regular season, beat Utah in a bowl game. They have quarterback uncertainty. They got Mike Wright in the portal. They do have, they have AJ Henning back. They have Cam Porter back. They some skill guys offensively. They have certainly questions on the offensive line. Couple good defensive players back. Year 2 of David Braun. I think staying the same for Northwestern would be a great season if they can. If they would replicate a winning record and a bowl appearance and a bowl win. I think that it's on the border between staying the same and potentially trending down here, just because last year after their mess was so surprisingly good.
It was surprisingly good, and in the name of setting fair expectations, I did almost go trending down. I mostly didn't know what to do. I wasn't exactly sure how to synthesize what happened last year, right? How to process it. So I guess I wanted to give David Braun a tip of the cap and say nice job last year and give you a stay the same for this year. But I will also say that their quarterback plan this offseason, which seemed to kind of not exist, or at least maybe kind of blew up on them, did not inspire a whole lot of confidence. So this could very well be a trending down that we're a little too optimistic on, but I wasn't quite sure what to do with Northwestern.
Yeah, the one thing is David Braun just took over Pat Fitzgerald's staff last year. Now he has his own staff. He was the defensive coordinator and the head coach last year. He has a DC. He has Zach Lujan, the new offensive coordinator that we mentioned, new offensive line coach. So he has his guys in. So you would think there's parts of that there. It's okay, that'll be even better. Ben Bryant really made some plays for them at quarterback last year. Mike Wright has had some good moments in the SEC. So, I don't think there's necessarily a huge drop off there. So I think staying the same is the solid choice, but I think staying the same is a victory. And again, they're going to have two kind of weird seasons of playing the majority of their home games on a 15,000 seat temporary venue on the shores of Lake Michigan, which will be kind of cool and maybe turns into a weird home field advantage. It is going to be windy there. It is going to be hard for visiting fans to get in a world where Ryan Field, like, it's like 45,000 seats and half of them would be visiting fans a lot of the time. Like, it's going to be an odd window. They're playing 5 of their 7 home games this season in that lakefront venue, including Big Ten games against Indiana and Wisconsin. So, like, I don't know. When I was in high school, I was on the golf team, and we played in a conference with real golf teams, but our home course was a 9-hole course that had a bunch of like 163-yard holes on the side of a mountain. And these good teams would come in, and we were like the scrappy ding-dongs with garage sale clubs, and we could hang with those teams on our course. Because I was like, I can't hit a drive 200 yards, but on this hole, I know that I'm going to like bang it off that tree and roll it down the hill, and it'll go on the green. And then I'd go to a country club when we had visiting matches, and I'd shoot like 163. But on my course, I could hang. And I think that's also on the table for Northwestern over the next 2 seasons.
I think
like Wisconsin's better than Northwestern. Luke Fickell might be like, why is the ball blowing sideways in this game? What is happening? And David Braun's going to be like, I don't know, man. Sorry, we won 7-3. So I think staying the same is okay for Northwestern. Other staying the same is Penn State. Why did you say staying the same for 10-3 Penn State?
It just kind of feels like what they're always going to be, right? Like, it's right. It's what they have been under James Franklin. I think it's what they will be. I don't know. Like, they will have more access to the playoff for sure, right? So they'll be able to call themselves a playoff team, which is it's not a small thing. I'm not trying to diminish that necessarily, but win losses, I think you're still looking at a team that's going to hover between 9 and 11 wins like every year. I don't see how it pushes beyond that. It does feel like there's a little bit of a cap on what exactly Penn State could become.
The context has changed so that what Penn State is might now be a playoff team, but it doesn't necessarily mean that what Penn State is has changed. But it's like, is Penn State a top 12 program? It's like, kind of. Yeah. Like, they've all, like, if they had this for the past 10 years, they would have had a couple playoff appearances for sure. I think they are almost the ultimate staying the same program. It just depends whether you think staying the same is good or bad. Right. And I think perhaps unfairly to James Franklin, I think it is more often viewed as bad when you have to remind yourself that you could be trending down. And they're not. They're not trending down.
No.
They're Penn State.
No. Yeah,
they are Penn State.
That's right. They are unrivaled. Yeah. They'll tell you all about it.
Yeah. Yeah. We are what we thought we were. We are what we thought we were. That's 2 memes banging into each other. All right, let's start fighting. Disagreeing on Notre Dame. 10-3 a year ago. Where did you have these guys on your list? Going which way?
I had them stay the same.
Stay the same. And I had them trending up with a belief that if this is going to be like a playoff team this year, which I think you think that, how can that not be trending up? Why are you not trending up on Notre Dame?
Because they're Penn State. All right. Like the context has changed, but the team is the same, right? Like, Brian Kelly was going 10-3 at Notre Dame. And I was actually also looking at like some roster construction trends as well. And like there was an anticipated boost, I think, in the way that Notre Dame builds its roster when they handed the program over to Marcus Freeman that I don't think has happened. I just think they're kind of the same program they were when Brian Kelly was there, which is sometimes good enough to make the playoff. And now they'll be more often good enough to win the playoff because the playoff is expanded. But I still don't think it's a program that has like elevated itself like anywhere near the platform of the programs that are going to be actually contending for national championships.
So I think we may just have a disagree. So I said they're trending up because I think, well, if they're have a decent chance to make the playoff, that's trending up to me. But you're saying even if they make the playoff, that could be staying the same if they're like a playoff team that really is not competing for a national title. It just so happens that they're a borderline top 10 program, and now that's good enough to make the playoff, but they're the same.
Yeah, that's my thought. Yeah.
All right. I think I had them up and Penn State the same because I might believe in Notre Dame's playoff chances 25% more than I believe in Penn State's playoff chances this year. So we probably don't disagree much here on the type of program and the type of season we're looking at. We're just disagreeing on what label we put on that. So, okay. Iowa, 10-4. What did you have for Iowa? What does a 10-4 Iowa team, which way are they headed for you?
I had them staying the same, but I will say I did strongly consider upward trend for the simple fact that they got rid of the Nepo baby as their offensive coordinator, which is probably enough, right?
Welcome to my up designation.
Yeah.
Yes. Like the ultimate addition by subtraction.
Yeah.
And again,
yeah.
I don't know that there's a ton of enthusiasm around Tim Lester, but he ain't the previous guy. And that is more than enough for me. Yeah. Woo! 60th best offense in the country. Here come the Hawkeyes. Look out, mama. So we think the defense is going to be great. And if they're moderately competent on offense, they, I think, will be in the playoff discussion for much of the year, if not the entire year, up until their last game against Nebraska. I'm not sure that I'm going to pick them to make the playoff because I think there's a lot of good teams in the Big Ten. I don't think they're one of the 4 best teams in the Big Ten right now, but I think schedule, I think how good that defense is. Can't wait for Iowa State, Iowa early season. We think that's 2 really good teams, and I think that game will tell us something. But I thought up, and I think if we stayed on here for 20 minutes and I just said, Brian's gone.
Yeah.
I think I could get you to up.
I think you could too. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Next one that we disagree on is 8-5 Maryland. What did you have for Maryland?
I had Maryland trending down.
I had them staying the same, but with Tua Tagovailoa leaving, I will hear the argument for down. Why down?
I think Talia did a lot to keep that program pretty steady.
Not Tua. My bad.
Oh,
Talia,
sorry. I think Talia did a lot to keep that program pretty steady, and now he's gone. And I also think, like, if you look at the way the roster has come together the last couple of years, like they're not recruiting quite as well as they did like at the beginning of Mike Loxley's tenure, when I think there was like some reason to be excited about Maryland kind of unlocking some more of its recruiting potential. And its positioning within its own conference is getting worse too. So like, it was an easy trend down for me.
3-9, 2-3, 7-6, 8-5, 8-5 for Mike Loxley. 3 bowl games the last three seasons, 3 straight winning seasons. I do think that is a pretty high level of success for Maryland. Mm-hmm. They also never quite got over the top, but I will buy the idea that it's possible we've seen the peak of this version of Maryland. Yeah. And now we have what I would say, I'm not expecting them to fall off a cliff, but maybe a slow descent that then leads to a world where in 3 years, Maryland's like, okay, this is what it is. Let's try something new. Man, wouldn't it have been nice to kind of get over the top a little bit more? But we had 3 straight winning seasons, and that was good. But this could be the beginning of Maryland going the wrong way.
Yeah, I think so.
All right, you could talk me into sharing that down. Boston College 7-6. We disagreed on this. What did you say for Boston College?
I had them staying the same because I just don't like. From Steve Adazio to Jeff Hafley to now Bill O'Brien, I just expect them to be like between 5 and 7 wins every year. Yeah. I just don't know how you could be better than that.
So I'm believing in the Shianification of Boston College. If Bill O'Brien is like the ultimate guy for that job, the way Greg Schiano is at Rutgers, they can increase their Northeast recruiting. I think their skill guys are good. If Bill O'Brien can work a little quarterback magic, if he really wants to be there, he's out with the megaphone on campus saying, come watch the Eagles. I would say they're up almost just on enthusiasm for all the things we've talked about with Bill O'Brien. Will it translate like right now on the field? They went to a bowl game last year. Will they make a bowl game with Bill O'Brien this year? I think they have a chance. I think their offensive line is okay. I think their defense has a couple guys, and I think their skills pretty darn good. They have to make sure that Thomas Castellanos is their guy at quarterback. But I think like mine is mostly a program. Is a Bill O'Brien hire, right guy for the job? Can he energize the students and the fan base and maybe build something a little sustainable there in a way that hasn't happened in a while? I'm a program up.
Yeah, I get all that, but I like Steve Adazio was like from Connecticut and cared about Boston College and like had a little bit of something to him and had the guys being dudes videos, and like the peak of that was 7 wins. And like they were 4-4 in the ACC, I think, like all but 2 of the 7 seasons Steve Adazio was there. It's just a really hard job.
Yeah.
So like staying the same for like from 7 and 6, I think is pretty good for Boston College more often.
Yeah. All right, Minnesota. We disagreed on this. You had Minnesota trending down, right?
I did. Yeah. I just, it's probably a little harsh, right? Because we've talked about the high floor aspect of Minnesota's program, and or maybe more specifically of PJ Fleck as a head coach. So I'm probably wrong. I just I didn't love what happened with them last year. I didn't love like the quarterback stuff. I don't love that they lost Joe Rossi this offseason to Michigan State, their defensive coordinator. Like there's some stuff there that seems like it's getting picked apart a little bit, and I'm just kind of wondering where that's going to leave Minnesota. It's probably more fair to say stay the same at the moment than trending down, but I'm a little bit a prisoner of the moment, I think, based off last year and said trending down.
I think if it's a trend down, it's PJ Fleck being a victim of his own success. 5-7 in year one at Minnesota in 2017, 7-6 in 2018, and then the next 3 full seasons, not counting the COVID year, they won 9 games every year. 11-2 in 2019 when they finished number 10 in the final AP poll. 3-4 in the COVID year, then 9-4, 9-4. So 3 full seasons, 11-2, 9-4, 9-4 at Minnesota. And then 6-7 last year where they go 5-7, get into the bowl game because of their academics. We've talked about like their win total we think is too low for them. I guess, right, they did trend down last year. Do you think that's a trend or do you think it's a blip? And they get back from being a 5-7 team to something more like a 7-5, 8-4 team, which again, they're a Big Ten West team formerly. They could be a victim of that. But I still think I believe in PJ Fleck, and I'm willing to take last year as more of a blip where they just got off with the quarterback, and maybe Max Brosmer is a 1-year salve, and then Drake Lindsay, the next guy up, and they get it back. And even without the Big Ten West, maybe they get back to being like an 8 or 9 win team, which would be great for them.
I think it's definitely possible. I mean, honestly, if not likely, like I said, I could be being a little harsh here based off one season.
All right, Purdue. We disagreed on Purdue. What did you have for the Boilermakers?
I had trending down.
Do you have trending down? And I had, this is our greatest disagreement because I had trending up. Not just like staying the same. I have trending up because I went up because of all the things we talked about in the spring preview about the 18 transfers they brought in. They brought in some Georgia guys that are going to make an impact on offense and on defense. Hudson Card is back. I think there's a better version of Hudson Card that is out there. They have Devin Mockabee and Reggie Love in the backfield. Like I think their secondary could be pretty good. I like the way Ryan Walters, after just an okay first year at 4-8, like really attacked the portal. And I'm willing to say, okay, like that was like a found, just a kind of what a year one is. But I like the way he went about his business this offseason, which is why I said up. But for us to be on the opposite sides of up and down, everything else we do is somebody had a same and somebody had an up or a down. This is our only absolutely opposite directions. You think Purdue is down from a 4-8 type of program?
Yeah, I that the first season did not inspire a whole lot of confidence for me. Okay. Like Ryan Walters took over a program that had won 17 games the previous 2 years, that had played in the Big Ten championship. Jeff Brom's first season, he had a winning season at Purdue. He took over a 3-9 team and had a winning season. Like I just thought that it bottomed out in a way that I did not think was going to happen. Like I was really excited about the hire because I thought Purdue was positioned pretty well, and maybe I'm not giving enough. Or putting enough on like maybe how the roster turned over from Jeff Brom, right? You're like going from an offensive coach to a defensive coach kind of thing. Like I understand there's transitions that are involved there, but I thought that Ryan Walters probably should have had a bowl team in his first year and he didn't. And maybe he will this year and I'll be wrong, but I don't know. It just makes me a little nervous about the direction things are going.
Okay. I mean, I was really excited about the Hudson Card transfer. Like Aiden O'Connell was pretty darn good there for a while, but also he might have been pretty darn good there because Jeff Brom was coaching him up,
Yeah.
So, I think you could have like a 45-minute argument on whether Purdue is trending up or trending down. I think this would be really interesting. I'd be curious. Our good friend Nathan Baird is actually going to go start covering Purdue, so we can have him on the show.
Have him on the show and talk about it. Yeah, that'd be great.
Talk about it. Which way is Purdue trending? So I think I think this is maybe the best argument. And again, it's the one where we are the most divided on an up and a down. And also, I'm just an optimistic little fella. Last one is Pitt. And we disagreed on this. Actually, I take it back. We disagreed in the same way. There's two teams where we said up and down opposite. Meanie, down for Pitt for 3-9 Pitt. Why?
I'm wondering if Pat Narduzzi's run his course there a little bit, which like I know we've had that conversation about like how good he's been and maybe not being so hyper reactive to a little bit of a dip there, but I think I'm going to be hyper reactive to it. Like he's finally like made the decision to like revamp the offense, and we'll see where that takes them. But I don't know that I'm not feeling very optimistic about where Pitt's going under Pat Narduzzi at the moment.
So I say up because I appreciate an old school coach reacting to failure. And so to completely redo the offensive staff, bring in a new coordinator, change the style, bring in a bunch of guys from East Carolina as part of that, I liked that reaction. If he hadn't done that, I would say trending down because, again, Pitt was a double-digit win team for 2 consecutive years and then went 3-9, right? Like we have to remember. Is any of this victim of his own success for Pat Narduzzi, or are you just kind of thinking like, I don't know?
Yeah, I think part of it is, and part of it also is like me just like not liking the vibes that Pat Narduzzi kind of put out there while his team was going 3-9. It's like, you're the head coach, it's your fault. kind of thing, which he didn't seem particularly interested in. So I don't know. Maybe that's personal bias is creeping in when it shouldn't be.
No, I think that's fair. But I just think Cade Bell has a chance to like reshape what Pitt is all about. And we do have to remember that Pitt was 11-3 in 2021 and 9-4 in 2022 and finished in the 13th and 22nd in the nation, which like that's incredible success for modern day Pitt, right? In the ACC, that's awesome. That is an awesome 2-year run. And I know the bottom fell out, but they had Phil Dracovic, a quarterback that they thought I think was going to be an answer, and then it wasn't, and they really got lost. And clearly, the offensive coordinator and Narduzzi, like there was blame and not on the same page. But I am excited by acknowledgement of failure and drastic change. So I was excited. Like I got excited when Wisconsin was like, not good enough, change it. And Pitt's doing a very similar kind of thing, but without firing the head coach. The head coach himself is doing it. Because you could have done with Pat Narduzzi what Wisconsin did with Paul Chryst. It's like, okay, this is not it. Would have been a quick trigger after 3-9 year after 20 wins in 2 years. But so I think he did not deserve to be fired. But he did it himself. He like wiped out the offense. So here we go. Yeah. So I believe in that. And I think they have enough interesting guys on offense that I think it could work. And I love the fact that Eli Holstein, the Alabama transfer, is sitting there waiting for a chance. Yeah. So I'm not swaying you.
Their projected win total is 5.5. So like that is technically improvement off 3-9 if they get there. I just don't like. I'm looking at their schedule. Right, it's like they're going to beat Kent State. They'll beat Cincinnati. They'll beat Youngstown State. West Virginia at North Carolina, Cal. Syracuse at SMU, Virginia, Clemson at Louisville, at Boston College. It's like 2 or 3 more wins there. You know what I mean? Like I don't know. Beat
Cal and SMU and Virginia. Like I think they could be a bowl team. Like if they go 6-6 and make a bowl, that's absolutely trending up, right? Especially if the
it'd be a nice bounce back. Yeah, it'd be a nice bounce back. Yeah.
If they can get to 6-6, and whether it's Nate Yarnell showing like he's the guy, or whether it's like Eli Holstein's waiting, and it's like they could be a year from now be like, hey, remember how Pitt got back to 6-6 and made a bowl and like showed like, hey, like this could be like a real offense. I think that's on the table, which is why I'm up. But I understand why you're down. It's just like, it's like, how do you view a bottoming out? Do you view a bottoming out of like, this is it? Like that was bad and it's only going to get worse? Or is it like, they hit the bottom and now they're going to bounce back up? So I think, I had Cincinnati down because like if they're hitting the bottom and they've kind of already Yeah, they brought in a new defensive coordinator too. We love the Tyson Veit hire. I mean, like maybe Cincinnati's doing the same thing Pitt did, which is like we had a bad year last year. It wasn't good enough. Let's make some changes. And like I'm just more into the Pitt side of things. So, but I get it. So 7 disagreements, 2 staying the same, 12 trending up, and 5 that we agree trending down. We just wanted to give everybody a lay of the land here in the North. We'll continue to do that through this offseason. And then guess what? We are not that far away from conference media days. And then we're not that far away from college football games. As always, thanks to our producer, Mike Urostowski, for making us look good and sound good. For now, he is Bill Landis. I'm Doug Lesmerises, and that was Kings of the North.